The other problem is the emerging agricultural pollution dilemma, which we're finding ourselves in through soil contamination, toxicity, and pest resistance. We all know about the natural disasters. Jamaica's felt the effect of Hurricane Ivan, so has Grenada, and the impact that these hurricanes and tropical storms are having on our food crops, as well as on the fishing industry. And this is also resulting in pollution, particularly through sedimentation. Monoculture cropping has also been another Caribbean problem. Neglect of diversification. We have focused primarily on one crop, most of the Caribbean countries. And some of us have not even focused on crops, where the agricultural sector, like in Trinidad, has been totally neglected for the energy sector. So we're in Trinidad are now considering drinking gas because we have so much of that and food prices are so high. So these are the regional dynamics. We also have some global dynamics. These have been surfacing in contemporary debates on what is causing the food crisis. And of course, our politicians are just jumping to these excuses as being the main reason. For example, the fundamental shift in food-producing land usage. For example, Russia and Ukraine removed some 23 million hectares of arable land from production, 90% of which were formerly used for grain production. The emerging biofuel markets, where a lot of arable land is being used to produce commodities such as oilseeds, palm oils, and corn for biofuels, and these were previously used for food production. Brazil, which is one of the largest food producers in the world, are now converting a lot of land for the production of corn in order to make ethanol. Then we have the emergence of India and China, the Asian giants with a population of 1.3 billion and 1.1 billion respectively, causing unprecedented increase in demand for wheat, corn, and other staples. Standards of living have improved in these countries. China, for example, now eating more meat. The Chinese, in 1995, consumed 25 kilograms of meat per person. This increased to 31 in 1999, 50 in 2000, and today 53 kilograms per person. So Chinese meat consumption is nonetheless 45% less than the average consumption in the United States. So even Western consumption of meat is causing a problem because of the heavy demand now. An additional 277 million tons of grain would also be needed to support China at parity with the United States, and this would take 68 million acres to grow. The high price of crude oil, and our consumer minister actually came to the university not too long ago to talk about the food crisis. And one of, like I said, they're jumping on the global forces as a reason. So I said, well, why are we complaining? Aren't we an energy producing country? Why aren't we complaining about the high price of crude? Well, obviously, they had not considered using the increased revenue from oil in the past to mitigate an impending food crisis. There was no foresight in developing an agricultural sector in Trinidad. And this was a problem that was bound to arise. Because my ancestors, my parents and my grandparents were actually involved in food crop and sugarcane farming. But they educated us. And my generation, the younger generation, are not interested in going back to the land, because that's the very reason why they educated us, so we wouldn't be planting food crops and sugarcane. So the problem was foreseeable, but with all the oil money, we hadn't considered developing the agriculture industry in Trinidad. And finally, global warming and climate change. These are other reasons for the food problem. Severe drought. We have winter floods in China, devastating rice crops. Australia and New Zealand, which are two of the major producers of milk, have experienced severe droughts over the last 2 years, causing reductions in the stock of cattle for milk production. Also, heavy rainfall in the Caribbean. Last week, we had flooding in Trinidad, heavy flooding, considerably reducing the available food supply. So what do? We have a food crisis. And now to turn to Cuba. Is Cuba experiencing this food crisis as well? The answer is yes. Cuba spends $1.6 billion annually on food imports, about a third from the United States, which exempts food and farm imports from its embargo because of an act which was passed in 2001 known as the Trade Sanctions Reform and Export Enhancement Act, allowing the export or Cubans to buy food and medicine. At the farmers market in Cuba, you can find basics like cabbage and oranges, but tomatoes and lettuce disappear during the rainy summer, and imported apples are considered a rare delicacy. But Cuba has been dealing with this problem, and this is the difference. Cuba has experience in dealing with a food crisis, because at the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989 and the enactment of the Cuban Democracy Act and the Helms-Burton Law, the Torricelli Bill and the Helms-Burton Law in 1992 and 1996 respectively, the Cubans had no option. So they began to experiment on agricultural production to expand their food supply. First of all, they began to grow organic produce and develop their own biopesticides and fertilizers to increase plant yields. And very, very innovative and simple methods. For example, they cut the banana stems, they put honey, and they put that in the sweet potato fields, which have been plagued by insects. And these stems would capture the insects, and they've actually almost totally eradicated that pest problem through bio methods. Many areas in Cuba today produce 80 to 100% of their food requirements. Even with traditional tools, 60% of Cuba's total food output on just a third of its arable land has been produced. Cuba's agricultural output grew 7.5% for the first half of 2008. Private farmers bring 85% of their produce sold in markets, although they cultivate only 15% of the arable land. 730,000 farming households in Cuba have improved their food security. There have also been state-controlled cooperatives developed under Fidel Castro, which have been operating like modern mega farms on huge swaths of land, often using heavy equipment and sophisticated irrigation systems. And they control all kinds of crops, including signature products like sugar.